In part one, I walked through how Somalia collapsed, how clans replaced the state, how survival economies formed, and how groups like Al Shabab operate inside that system. Part two answers the question that most people ask next. If we understand the problem, why do the solutions keep failing? This isn't about criticizing intentions. Most people involved in policy or military operations generally want to help. The issue isn't effort, it's incentives. Unfortunately, good intentions don't overcome bad incentive structures, and incentives will win every time. The core problem is we target symptoms, not systems. Most external efforts focus on what we want Somalia to look like: a central government, national army, formal courts, and Western style institutions. But Somalia doesn't operate on that framework. It operates on clan loyalty, informal enforcement, local power brokers, and survival based economics. When solutions ignore how power actually functions on the ground, failure isn't surprising, it's predictable. Our journey into the past to understand this issue starts with Operation Restore Hope and Operation Gothic Serpent. In 1992, the United States led Operation Restore Hope. The mission was limited and clear: secure humanitarian corridors and reduce famine driven violence. Tactically, it worked. Aid flowed, violence dropped in secured zones, and starvation decreased. The mission later evolved under UNISOM 2, from humanitarian relief to coercive police enforcement, attempting to disarm warlords and rebuild centralized authority. That shift culminated in Operation Gothic Serpent. Most people know that period through the film Black Hawk Down. What that movie captures well is the tactical intensity. What it cannot fully show was the structural problem. Targeting high value individuals did not dismantle clan based power systems. Removing leadership did not replace governance. Enforcement escalated without legitimacy expanding. Capturing leaders is not the same as replacing the systems that sustain them. So the next question we must ask is why security gains don't hold. From a military perspective, counterterrorism operations often succeed tactically. Leaders are removed, networks are disrupted, territory changes hands, but the effects rarely last because security is only temporary. If a village knows that the government cannot stay, militants will return, refusal will be punished, compliance becomes rational. Security that leaves creates space for coercion to return stronger, because presence must outlast fear. For more than a decade, the African Union Mission in Somalia now transitioned to the African Union Transition Mission of Somalia, which has provided the backbone of external security. Operationally, these forces cleared major urban centers, secured federal infrastructure, and pushed al-Shabaab out of visible territorial control. But rural influence often reverted when forces repositioned. Clearing terrain does not permanently change risk calculations. If locals ultimately believe that the militants will return, they hedge their bets. Suppression without permanence only produces temporary alignment. So why is training local forces not enough? Billions have gone into training Somali security forces. On paper, that makes sense. In practice, several realities interfere. Clan loyalty outweighs national identity. Units fracture along family lines. Salaries and equipment are diverted. Chain of command structures collapse under political pressure. And this isn't necessarily incompetence. It's incentive alignment. And this isn't unique to Somalia. We encountered similar dynamics in Iraq. In Iraq, tribal affiliation far outweighed the national identity, especially when confidence in the state's durability was uncertain. Asking individuals to risk their families for institutions that may not endure is strategically optimistic at best. A soldier's first obligation is to family and tribe, not to a state that has yet to prove permanence. Ignoring that reality only creates surprises later. So why does aid often backfire? Aid is meant to stabilize. It saves lives, it prevents famine, it keeps basic systems functioning. That impact is real, but aid is only designed to be temporary. It's supposed to buy time for local systems to rebuild and regain economic independence. When aid becomes long-term or structural, incentives will shift. Large sustained aid flows can create rent-seeking behavior, incentivize corruption, empower gatekeepers, and distort local accountability. If external funding replaces taxation or productivity, accountability shifts outward instead of inward. When citizens fund their own state, they demand performance. When outsiders fund it, that feedback loop only weakens. Aid reduces suffering, but it does not transition towards self-sufficiency. It risks reinforcing fragility. The goal of aid should only be transition, not permanence. So after all these operations and all this funding, why does al-Shabaab still survive? Al-Shabaab persists not because it is universally loved, because it is structurally embedded, and it survives in spite of sustained pressure, in spite of operations with special operation forces, in spite of Somalia government offensives, in spite of African Union forces, and in spite of local clans and anti-al-Shabaab militias actively resisting them. That resistance is real and has been constant, yet al-Shabaab continues to endure and operate. Because it does more than fight. It enforces rules, collects taxes, it punishes non-compliance, and protects revenue streams. When security is inconsistent, predictable coercion effectively competes with fragmented authority. People do not have to agree with its ideology. They only have to simply calculate the risk. If resisting today means retaliation tomorrow, and protection cannot be guaranteed long term, compliance becomes rational. Disruption alone does not eliminate that system. As long as incentives remain intact, adaptation follows. So why do international missions hit a ceiling? External missions can suppress violence and prevent collapse. They can buy time. They can reduce immediate threats. They can support fragile institutions. They cannot manufacture legitimacy. This is where culture matters structurally, not morally. In societies where identity is primarily national, centralized authority has a foundation. In societies where identity is primarily clan-based, tribal, or localized, centralized authority competes with existing loyalty structures. In Somalia, kinship networks and clan systems long predate the modern state. We have seen similar structural friction in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and Yemen. When loyalty flows horizontally through tribe or region, instead of vertically through the state, imposing centralized authority becomes far more difficult. Security can provide it externally. Legitimacy must emerge internally. When that alignment does not happen, international missions always hit a ceiling. From a special operations perspective, Somalia reinforces a hard but necessary truth. Special operations forces are a highly capable force. SOF can disrupt networks, remove leadership, target high-value threats, build partner capacity, and operate in denied environments. And it does all those things exceptionally well. But capability does not equal omnipotence. SOF can create space. It can buy time and shape conditions. It cannot solve structural political problems. It cannot manufacture a national identity. And it cannot impose legitimacy. It cannot realign deeply embedded incentive systems on its own. When the strategy expects SOF to produce outcomes that require political reconciliation, economic reform, and generational shifts, it is asking a military tool to solve non-military problems. Special operations forces are powerful, but they are not a substitute for governance. SOF can enable change, but it cannot be the change. Before I close this out, if this breakdown added value, liking the video and subscribing helps it to reach the people who actually want this context. And if you want to support the channel even further, consider becoming a member. Membership helps me keep doing long-form analysis like this without watering it down. I appreciate you all being here. And in closing, if incentives stay the same, outcomes will never change. That is the structural reality most interventions struggle to overcome. And in part 3 of the Understanding Somalia series, I'm going to zoom out and look at other failed states. Where have incentives actually shifted successfully? Where have they collapsed? And what can Somalia realistically learn from these examples? Because Somalia isn't unique, it's just unfinished.